Yes, welcome guys. Hope you're enjoying the series. We're gonna jump straight in. We're gonna call this episode Poland under full occupation. And what I mean by that is we're gonna pick up where we left off. So, we've covered the late 1700s. They had the Duchy of Warsaw, which was a short-lived state. It's now the year 1815. The Napoleonic era is on its way out. The Poles have been completely occupied, but this time the Russians have more of the pie. They've literally invaded their country and just taken it as their own, basically. And it's to become, later on down the line, the Eastern Bloc and part of the Soviet Union. But we'll leave that where it is for now, yeah? So we're going to be going in about, starting from 1815 right up until the 1900s, and go into what the ideology was about back around then, because they were seen to be, or they were going to become like, or being lined up to become the slave race of Europe, yeah. And they were seen as surplus to requirements unless you had the blonde hair and the blue eyes. Yeah, if you had the blonde hair and the blue eyes, then you've been alright. So I'd have been alright. I'd have been alright. Definitely. Come on, man. I'd have been alright. Look at my hair. Look at me. Come on, man. Look at me, man. Do you know what I mean? I've got lovely blue eyes. Come on. So, right. Anyway, just imagine it's the year 1815. The Napoleonic era is resigned to the pages of history. The political outlook renders itself ominous for the by now defunct Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Completely spent and lacking in military reserves, Poland slips into the mounted crucifix of occupational intoxication of a bitter foreign vodka. The Russians, scorned after the threat of Napoleon's invasion, were in no mood for forfeit to Western powers into possessing the upper hand again. This time, Russia, Prussia, and the declining Austrian Empire decided to annex Poland into each of their respective unions. 100% of the kingdom's land was divided amongst the three powers, with a staggering 65% falling under the administration of Moscow directives, and the remaining percentages of land divvied up between the two lesser powers. So Russia was the major stakeholder in terms of sovereignty of Poland, or the administration of Poland, right? The delegation of the impending divisional land grab reached agreement in session at the Congress of Vienna 1815, which was a series of meetings to decide and reshape the balance of power after the vacuum left by the defeat of Napoleonic France. Britain, as part of the victory coalition, would have been party to meeting notes and would have been in presence minus decision-making responsibilities when the fourth partition of Poland was created. So Poland had the three partitions pre-1800. After having the Duchy of Warsaw, they were then put into a partition again after a meeting of the European powers of the time at the Vienna Congress of 1815. Britain would have been present, but according to notes read by myself, they wouldn't have had the decision-making abilities. That would have been down to the surrounding powers of Prussia and Russia still, yeah? So they made the decision, and this time Russia took more of a percentage of the land of Poland, yeah? So, literally, we skip the 18th century because Poland was in slumber. They was fully occupied at this time. Literally, it took 100 years for them to revive themselves. There were slight uprisings in the 1800s, but nothing of significance that allowed them to overturn the occupation in any way, shape or form. So anyway, we take things up in the 1900s, yeah? The next 100 years would be spent in political servitude, as Poland are universally seen as extinct and never to be granted country status under the power dynamics of the 19th century. In terms of pride, this period would have seen the Poles' national conscience at its lowest ebb as they struggle to wrestle free from generational oppression. For Poland to regain sovereignty, one would have to envisage a great event that poses existential risk to regional order. After 100 years of the existential asteroid arrives on cue, with the Central European powers embroiled in tit-for-tat threats culminating in the declaration of war in 1914. This time, there was a new superpower at the casino table wielding power that was representing the most powerful military force ever assembled. And we're talking about the USA. The United States of America had quite a large part to play regarding the First and Second World Wars, when previously they never had such an impact on mainland Europe. Now things have changed. There's a new power dynamic, and it's the American power dynamic, because they were now obviously the world leaders in terms of military. And in terms of political dominance, there was none other bigger than America or the USA at the particular time, you know. So, that being said, enter the USA, who had a major part in the First World War, as they were from an ancestral and economic monetary loan interest favoured a stable Europe, as is the phenomenal domino effect that if Europe was revolving in conflict, then all their power outlets, whether it be colonial or close diplomatic ties, would exhaust into rage their own inferno of war. So what I was trying to say there was, it was in their interest to stabilise Europe, because if you don't stabilise Europe, all of the other colonies that have got European colonial ties could obviously engage in war, and there could be wars all over the world, and it could make for an unstable place. So it makes if you make Europe stable, the rest of the world will be stable at that particular time, which kind of proved wise, because that's how the Second World War went. It was like everywhere around the world, because it wasn't stable in Europe. As soon as Europe stabilised itself, the whole rest of the world sort of aligned. Yeah. Right. So in through the back door, Poland, due to its geographical location, sits equidistant between Russia and Germany, which serves the ideal location as a buffer state. So Poland, lucky or unlucky, is in between Germany, which is a superpower of the time, and you could say still now, and Russia. So geographically, not the best place. Kind of like sets them up forever at this present juncture, and moving forward as just, a buffer state, Because if they try and get any bigger than that and pose threats, history could repeat itself. So they have to play their position quite carefully on both sides, yeah? So, to not dilute power in this region was seen as unwise and could have seen an emergence of a Eurasian superstate. Therefore, Western powers, after consultation, saw for purposes of regional stability that Poland was ideally placed for becoming collateral, ideological disposal ground between the reddened cheeks of the pleasant sandwich of Europe's most powerful eastern state and mainland Europe's most tyrannical. Poland, on grounds of peace in the east, was handed the first stage of independence, which was that of a lame puppet. Peace would come at a cost, as they were handed over in vulnerability to the state artists who enjoy the toils of state abuse via proxy, a whining complaint issued by any state of value that exists parallel or sits between superior factions. Right. So, the only degree of physical diversity is that Poland never possessed a resource to be contested for apart from its land and of course its finite battery-powered citizen that if Hitler would have been victorious may have been promoted under lock and key by the year 2025 of Europe as Europe's slave state, with the ECHR a long way off the installation of pastures of a minimum wage demands and worker rights. So, basically, you know, the Nazis have come in, or their kind of ideology is just coming into things. At the time, it was like German fascism, and then it sort of mutated and become Nazism, right? And you know, during this time, you know, anybody that was of ethnicity or ethnic minority, they were seen as surplus to requirements or starting trouble within the various countries, and they were looking to enslave them or have them working at the bottom of society, serving the Aryan race, the soon-to-be Aryan race. Yeah. So quite a dangerous ideology, especially for no one like me, but you know, quite a dangerous ideology, right? If it came through, and if it did come through, right now you could be talking about, you know, no ECHR, no one to hug your hood, you know, and literally like, you know, no rights, you know, if they had their way. That's what would have been, Europe would have been, you know, Poland, certain other certain minorities would have just been like used as cannon fodder for slave labour, basically, you know. So, this outcome is not something to be scoffed at afternoon tea. If Hitler had taken heed from the previous century's misgivings of assault on Moscow to be approached cautiously and manoeuvred in shorter incremental measure, more importantly won over the Polish and Lithuanian aristocracy, transcending into the indulgence of the realm of attrition, which was over time, with growing influence around the globe of a burgeoning movement that firmly secured European right of position, reroutes history. No doubt the shift or tactical inertia would have caused the monumental recalculation of 1940s structural makeup. Could it be imagined, even the USA at the time, a white country with plenty of cannon fodder to tailor fit the program of white geopolitical ideological insecurities, sympathise with Germanisation? Would they begin to hold Nazi beliefs before the Most High? A successful dynastic rule is often rewarded with untold exponential support, just like any major sports team that receives its fanatical cravings that clergy wishes it could obtain in minuscule for enthusiasm. Right. So, you know, literally, you know, they occupied Poland, and then they thought, right, we're going to go for Moscow. They made the same mistakes as Napoleon a century before. Never sort of done the right reconnaissance to know that they just couldn't run up in Moscow and dominate and take over. You know, so he overshot himself on the eastern flank, the Wehrmacht, and they were to pay for it, you know, they were to pay for it. But, you know, if Hitler and his regime maybe would have taken stock, not sort of advanced into Russian territory and just took stock for a few years, you never know what the outcome could have been. Because over that time, they would have definitely built up, because they would have been seen as a successful regime, yeah, they would have definitely become more popular. Who knows? They could have got an uprising in America that wanted to see white power, yeah, and you never know, they could have turned the Americans onto their side of things. It's all about timing, yeah. You don't know, like, you know, they could have got a massive turnaround in America and literally taken over the whole of Europe and had American soldiers on their side, but they decided to overstep the mark, overstep what they had in terms of military prowess, and they ended up sort of potentially paying for it, you know. But also, as well as that, the more successful you are over a certain period, the more popular you get. It doesn't matter. You could be as evil as you want. But if you're popular for a year, you haven't given the interest, the exponential interest that you get. You know, like you put money in the bank, right? It accrues interest and it doubles over time and it increases, right? Can you imagine when you start winning and winning and winning and winning, all of a sudden this football team had 2 million fans. They've won a few matches. They've won a few European Cups. All of a sudden, they've gone from 2 million to 20 million. Now they've got 200 million supporters around the world. Do you know what I mean? And it happens very quickly off of a basis of a little bit of success and a foundation, you know. So if they might have held firm in Poland and just built that as an outpost and maybe turned around some of the Polish, you're talking about a force of people turning towards Russia now, who may be Poland's original greatest enemy. You never know. It's how you play it, you know. But they didn't, and they paid for it. Anyway, right. This was not over from there, as the influence of Russification and Germanisation had begun to take more of a sinister turn. Clashing civil ideologies, sandwiched between the Bolshevik Revolution in Moscow and conflation of the rise of German fascism in Berlin, saw Mother Poland used as the experimental land of coerced re-education on what was ideologically in vogue in the first half of last century. Both sides, if not battling directly, were busy attempting to warp the citizen. In came a type of totalitarianism where schooling, culture and way of life were superimposed. Dissidence was dealt with in the harshest of ways, with the age of psychological exploration akin to the dot-com bubble or to the impending AI bubble was invested heavily upon in the markets of manipulation and torture on all citizens that would have to fear for existence if they stood out in any shape or way as the world comes to terms. From having one's physical being imprisoned for thousands of years to now having their own minds suffer the same fate as the revolution of devilish repetition designed to radicalize, if not secure demise, was scientifically spreading like wildfire. These practices, it's rumoured, have only had the tip of the iceberg pronounced. Polish grandparents possess many a story of what would have been not just the battlefield of the last 200 years, but what would have served the fertile ground for physical psychological experimentation against societally vulnerable groups with no propaganda of protection, such as Jews, Romani gypsies and the peasantry, who were surplus to requirements as they were seen as a dangerous impurity which could poison evolutionary goals of the master race. So, what can we say there? Well, very, very tough place to be. It was the age of a new ideology that saw a certain type of person as a good breed and everyone else as bad. Anyone that didn't fit the criteria was surplus to requirements. Surplus to requirements meaning you could end up in the gulag system. You could end up in a labour camp, a concentration camp, or you just could be executed. Yeah, either way, you were working or you were under extreme suppression and oppression as a people, right? And it was obviously dread. But what was different is that the world was becoming more of a psychological place. So, games of psychology were starting to come into the fray. And that'll be spoken about in the next episode because, you've got the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and you've got the Stasi come in, and it was a lot more of a psychological approach, a lot more surveillance, a lot more watching your neighbour, watching your brother, watching your friends, watching your family, yeah, and it created for a lot of paranoia. But we'll leave this here. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Yeah, I've enjoyed it. I've liked it. Yeah. So just to recap again, this was just the picking up from 1815. Obviously, Poland meets its independence around the 1918, 1915 stage, but it's not really independence. They're a little bit of a puppet nation. But then obviously they've got the ideology of the Nazi regime coming in, or German fascism as it was called back then. Then obviously we've got up to like the Second World War, and obviously Poland still feeling like it's occupied. But anyway, yeah, enjoy this section, enjoy this video, deliver this message straight to your heart because it's from mine. I'm out. Okay, bless, love, one.